Hi and welcome to another narration presented by yours truly, Cryptids Roost. Please be so kind as to throat punch the like button and smack the ass of the subscription button as well. And remember to chokehold that notification bell and then select all. That way you'll receive all notifications each time I upload a new video. And by subscribing you'll be the first to see all of our new spooky creepypasta stories. I would just like to say a very big thank you to all of the authors that I have worked with and all the ones that I will work with in the future. So thank you all, my brothers and sisters. If you would like to support the channel, I have now created an account at buymeacoffee.com. You can send your donations, big or small, at that site, link is below, or via paypal.me/cryptidsroost. And why not hashtag cryptidsroost in your comments. As an added bonus, be sure to check out the blooper reel at the end of the video. So grab your coffee, sit back and enjoy the show. And don't forget, where fear is, happiness is not. Recollections from a Small Town Mortician, Part 1. This awesome series is written by Loli-nero, a wonderful author over on Reddit. If you would like to read more of their works, a link to their Reddit profile will be below in the description. Look, I'm aware that my job isn't for everyone. Most people wouldn't have the stomach to stick their hands all up in someone else's. But I went along with the profession years ago for the sole reason that it's a family line sort of deal. While your daddy may have been a landscaper or a real estate agent, mine was busying himself performing autopsies and embalming the locals who'd gone a little early. He came home smelling like shit, both literal and metaphorical, and instilled in me from the wee ages that it was expected of me to take over the family business. Dreams of being an artist, dancer or musician? Unacceptable. I had to be the one to take over his job as the town's sole coroner. It was my duty as the one and only hall heir to do as told and perform this predetermined job. There were many fights about the topic in my teen years, but that really isn't all that relevant to this post. All you need to know is that I gave in and did it. When it was my turn to take over, to clear out my father's belongings to replace with my own, I did so with a lot of resentment. That was all of 10 years ago. 8 years of schooling and then 10 years of service at a job I hate. But at the very least, I've come out of it all with interesting stories. Not that I've had anyone to share these strange occurrences with, but that's besides the point, because I'm here now to test the waters. I've seen the many r/ask Reddit threads where people inquire about the stories of those who work close to death, and while I have been tempted to share my own stories in these places, well, chances are that had I shared most of my truly outstanding stories, they wouldn't be widely believed. You see, I live up in a small town in the Canadian Appalachians. Everyone knows one another here, and generally people are quite friendly. There's a majority Native American presence here. After all, this town originally started off as a tribe of Naskapi people, which, over the time of the white European colonisers making their rounds through Canada, becoming a melting pot of different peoples. Some Cree, Montane, Inuit and European folk ended up in this little town nestled in the mountainside and formed this community. Not even 1,000 people reside here, so one would figure that there's not a whole lot of business for me to go to, right? Dead fucking wrong. I get several bodies a week in my office, and never once in my 10 years of work has one of them been a resident of our town. Usually, if a hiker ended up dead in the mountains, maybe from the weather, a tree well or thirst, they'd see if they could be identified from personal effects, and if possible, send them back down to the relevant town to be looked over. This, however, has never once been the case. I've literally never had the body of a local in my office. Sure, people die. It's completely illogical to think that they don't, but for whatever reason, they've most likely all been sent out of town to be taken care of. Some of the weirdest states I've received bodies in are: 1. Old teeth were pulled and scattered around the nearby woods. There was no other physical damage done to the body, nor had any drugs been ingested. 2. A man from another town at the bottom of the mountain went missing. Only 12 hours later, he was found stuffed into a hollowed out log looking like he was a year into decomp. 3. A man who had no lower body, no scarring, nothing. I'd like to say it was a birth defect, but when he was identified, he very clearly had 2 completely functioning legs in every photo he'd been in for the full 58 years of his life. That's all a story for another day. I think instead I like to focus on my first strange out-of-towner I'd ever received. It was just 4 days after the practice had become my own when he'd been brought to me. The leaves had just begun to change and Halloween was nearing. It was still pitch black out and the frosty morning air bit at my skin. The sheriff, a weathered looking white man who'd long surpassed his 50s, had met me at the door to the building. 2 paramedics and another officer accompanied him outside a stilled ambulance. Sheriff Williams had held on to his position as chief of police for our frigid little town for over 20 years, and even as he sat in his 60s, he never seemed particularly keen on relinquishing the title to the day he ended up on my table. That last part didn't come from me, he himself stated so. Personally, I wasn't particularly interested in embalming the corpse of a family friend, but in the end, there literally wasn't anyone else to do it. Peering over the old man's shoulders as he lumbered up to me, a cigarette hanging loosely between his lips, I looked at the parked vehicle and stated, "This early?" He spat the cigarette butt onto the moist gravel ground, crushing it under the toe of his shoe before replying with a long, suffering grunt. "Yep, found him an hour ago, west about 1 kilometre outside of town, down by the little cliff. Looks like the fall was what did him in." He gestured to the others present, a beckoning wave propelling them all into action. They opened the ambulance doors, and between the 2 paramedics and the occasional help of the officer, they carefully lifted the gurney out of the ambulance bay and onto the ground. I held the door open for them as they entered the building and let them through to the morgue. It was just as cold in there as it was outside. At the times, even with no little real-life experience with my job, the moment they unzipped that black bag, I knew there was something very, very wrong with the corpse in front of me. There was absolutely no smell. While you may not personally know the smell of a dead, long, decomposing corpse that's been marinating in stagnant water, something of which I can say with experience that you are incredibly fortunate for, but something that you can probably guess is that they smell absolutely foul. I honestly don't think there's any smell worse than gross old human soup, and you can challenge me on that belief. I'll hold strong on it. His flesh had paled and bloated, his shirt was untucked and riding up his distended gut, the skin holding a strange bluish greenish hue to it. His eyelids had swollen up, leaving only slivers of the man's discoloured eyes to be seen behind them, his tongue bulbous and misshapen, peeking out from between blue lips, taking on a similar colour to his milky eyes. His fingers were sausage-like, and all in all, he looked like an overly full water balloon ready to pop at any given moment, which is a perfectly legitimate concern for anyone who works with heavily decomposed bodies. Basically, with that description, I'm trying to say that it was gross and pretty far along into decomposition. The guy had most likely been steeping in some creek for weeks before he'd been pulled up this morning, so to not even catch a whiff of the eye-watering stench of rot and decomposition on him, that's a tad bit weird. I snapped blue gloves over my hands and prodded carefully at the man's clothing, pouring up pockets or any conceivable place that a form of ID would be located. I found a washed out gum wrapper, the brand and flavour unrecognisable due to the water damage, and a Zippo lighter. Neither were going to really tell a whole lot about the guy on my table. Aside from that, he may have been a smoker, but there were likely hundreds of people in and around town that smoked cigarettes and weed, so it basically opened the door to literally anybody in fucking town. I pressed my upper teeth into the flesh of my lower lip and watched the body carefully, keeping silent for a couple of moments before addressing the sheriff. Was there any other clothing there? Bags? Anything tossed into the brush? I ran my latex-covered hands along the man's shin, finding that, to my surprise, the bone was entirely intact. There wasn't even so much as a hairline fracture, and to save my curiosity, I felt up the rest of the body, finding that he indeed didn't seem to have a single broken bone in his body. Nah, nothing around there. Just him face down in the creek in the clothes he's wearing. I pressed 2 thumbs along the sides of his neck, then above the Adam's apple, and paused. I pulled his jaw as far open as possible, but his swollen tongue made it impossible to see or reach past it into the throat. Push me the cart. One of the paramedics, a young man with dark hair, did so, wheeling the metal moving tray up to my side. There's something hard in his throat. I need to cut it open to remove what it is. I looked across the table to the sheriff, who stood quietly observing the area my hands hovered. I'd still been new at the time. I felt reluctant to do something like that without overt prompting, and the sheriff seemed to catch on to that. I'm not the coroner, Esme. That's your job. You went to school for it. You think it's necessary? You go ahead and do it. That was all the prompting I needed, and carefully, with a scalpel, I dipped the blade in the skin below the chin and slowly slid it down. Flesh, fat and muscle split at the blade's prompting, and still no smell came from the body as I split him open. I stopped just above the collarbone and discarded the dirty tool. Grey fat clung to my gloved fingers as I dug them into the crevice I carved into the cadaver, and slowly my fingers passed stringy muscle and soft fat. I found my way to the offending thing blocking the throat. I couldn't quite tell what exactly I was feeling. It wasn't sharp, edges rounded, it was broad and thick. It was slippery from the gastric juices that built up, and with the edges of the cut tight against the backs of my hands as I got a hold of it, I called someone over. I need one of you to hold the edges open for me. I can't pull what's in out. With the aid of the paramedics keeping the skin flaps open, I was slowly able to work the lodged item free. I wasn't too sure what to make of the item clasped in my hands. I looked up from it to the sheriff, checking to see if the same surprise that no doubt coloured my face was shared. But he didn't look at all shocked by the discovery. Glancing around at the room's other occupants, they didn't seem that surprised either at the palm-sized leather wallet that I'd just pulled from the throat of a cadaver. I don't think he fell off that cliff, Sheriff. He didn't reply, and carefully I peeled the thing open to check its contents. The college-aged man pictured on the driver's licence looked nothing like the remains that sat just a foot away from me. He was a handsome black man, a bright pearly smile creating dimples in his cheeks, looking every bit the fresh-faced young man he was meant to be. The card read Massachusetts, nowhere near where his body was found. Even now, 10 years later, I don't know how or why he was there. but I'd like to hope he was just a tourist, that nothing else was behind how far he'd ended up from home. I placed the wallet on the side in front of the sheriff, leaning my palms onto the table, smearing fluids across the thing as I did. I already knew that there would be a big mess to clean after this, though I'd never been so grateful that that responsibility did not fall on me. Massachusetts. I'll be honest, with this level of decomp, I doubt I'll be able to pinpoint the exact cause. I do know that he definitely didn't die from a fall. My eyes flickered between the wallet and the sheriff. Though, personal opinion, I think that the whole throat wallet probably had a whole lot to do with his death. The sheriff hummed. Alright, so what did he do? Decide he wanted a taste of his wallet? I raised a brow at him. People don't tend to do stuff like that. I think that someone else may have put it there. But you won't be able to say for sure? I regarded him with a strange look. I mean, yeah, technically I can't. Esme, people don't get murdered around here. There's nobody running around shoving wallets down people's throats. The baritone of his cigarette-worn voice turned serious, warning. I'd known this man since I was a little girl. I'd set up tea parties with him when I was 6. Whenever the weather was bad during high school, he'd stop by my house before and after school to drive me so I didn't have to get too wet. In all that time, he'd never once taken up that tone with me. It was bewildering to say the least. You'll see weird shit like this plenty work in this profession. Don't think too hard on it. It ain't a threat to you if you ain't a threat to it. You understand me, Esme? When I didn't answer right away, he simply waited. After a couple of long, pregnant seconds, I reluctantly agreed with him. He looked at me hard, analysing every crevice of my face before seeming to be satisfied with what he'd seen. He stepped away, nodding slightly. Good girl. You fix this fella up all right? I'll track down his family. Tell them the bad news. How long do you think until you can say you finished embalming this guy? Usually 2 hours. But the guy's in a bad state, so only God knows how long until he's cleaned up enough. They definitely won't be able to have an open casket funeral, that's for sure. I tossed my sullied gloves into a waste bin and stepped up alongside him. The paramedics left, taking some sort of cue that neither of us had sent out. I'll give you a call when he's ready though. Yeah, you do that. Briefly, he looked as though he wanted to add to what he said, but after staring at me, lips slightly parted, ready to speak at any moment, he pressed them into a thin line and made for the door. I'll talk to you later. Keep what I said in mind. You'll need it working this job. For years, I followed that advice. I ignored the weird, wrote off the bizarre deaths and strange cadavers that ended up on my table. And it worked out for me. I did my job and life was good for me. Turns out though, that when the dead body that ends up on your table sits up screaming, well, all that previous advice of ignoring the weird stuff, it gets a hell of a lot more difficult. If there's enough interest in my stories, I'll continue with this little retelling of my top 10 weirdest hits, but I can't continue at the moment. My guest just woke up from unconsciousness and I need to figure out what to do with him. Plus, I've already been writing for a while. Christ, the sheriff will be pissed if he finds out I broke the big rule. Esme Hall, 2016, October 14th. And I hope you all enjoy the following blooper reel. Well, chances are that had I shared most of my truly outstanding stories, they wouldn't be widely believed. You see, I live up in a small town in the Canadian Appalachians. So one would figure that so one would figure that there's not a whole lot of business for me to go to, right? I'd like to say it was a birth defect, but when he was identified, he very clearly had two completely functioning legs in every photo he'd been in for the full 58 years of his life. The leaves had just begun to change and Halloween was nearing. The skin holding a strange bluish greenish hue to it. He looked like an overly full water balloon ready to pop at any given moment. The guy had most likely been steeping in some creek for weeks before he'd been pulled up this morning. I tossed my sullied gloves into a waste bin and stepped up alongside him. My guest just woke up from unconsciousness and I need to figure out what to do with him. Esme Hall, 2016, October 14th. Hey family, be sure to like and subscribe to the channel. A very big thank you to Loli-nero for allowing me to narrate this awesome story. Make sure to check out Loli-nero's Reddit for more brilliant stories. Also be sure to check out the Loli-nero playlist here for more of their stories that I have narrated already. Take care everyone, and I hope you all have a wonderful and peaceful night. And don't forget, where fear is, happiness is not.